जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीर बनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल हरि बोल जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जगत से प्रभुपाद की
जय विष्णु पद परमांस परिव्रजकाचार्य सुतरत श्रीमान ऐसी भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी श्री प्रभुपाद की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय प्रेम से को श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरी गोवर्धन की जय श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय मायापुर धाम की जय जगन्नाथपुरी की जय सामवेद भक्त वृंद की जय all glories to the assembled devotees all glories to the assembled devotees all glories to the assembled devotees all glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today we're continuing with the reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, written by Satsvarup Das Goswami. Again, Satsvarup Maharaj wrote a letter to us appreciating that we're having these classes and we're going in depth, behind the scenes, over and beyond what he had written. Now, this research comes from Prabhupada's lectures himself, what he spoke, either intimately to his disciples. He might have mentioned more details in classes. And some of the details were not all available at the time that Satsvarup Maharaj wrote the book. So he was appreciating that we're adding more to what he has written and not just reading the books. Also, I was trying to encourage as many Prabhupada disciples and other senior devotees to give these classes. But Maharaj wrote that he wanted me to give the classes because I do intense research about Prabhupada's life, and he felt that sharing this research would help the devotees understand Prabhupada Lilamrita better. So I beg your forgiveness, though I wanted other devotees to speak more. Maharaj has requested me to continue with the classes. So we're in the very beginning of Prabhupada's childhood. Prabhupada had just described that his father would buy things 6 months to 1 year supply in advance. Now later this came in very handy because when there was the artificial famine created by the British government, the devotees actually didn't suffer. Prabhupada inquired from devotees even in the villages. And Krishna protected all of the devotees, although many hundreds and thousands, millions of people actually died during that artificial famine in 1942. So Prabhupada learned this from his father. So here Prabhupada continues. Oh, there were two other things. Last week we had heard about the plague when Prabhupada was about 1 or 1.5 years old. And we had heard that although thousands upon thousands of people died. Hundreds were dying every day from the plague. And Calcutta became practically empty. Everyone was trying to escape Calcutta because of the plague. So one Baba had Sankirtan, and then Prabhupada, he explained that actually this form of Sankirtan, according to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, is a form of Namaparad, because the chanting was being done for a material result. And then Prabhupada gave 2 slokas that I found just today. One was Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Verse 6. Savai Pungsham Parodharmo. That sloka, Sukadeva Goswami explains that devotional service should be a haituki and a pratihata. Haituki means for no reason. We don't have any motive for doing service to the Supreme Lord. It's simply for His pleasure. And a pratihata. Nothing can stop it. Nothing can oppose our service. So then there was another reference. You see, after Prabhupada left and entered Samadhi, in Prabhupada's house we used to play all day and evening, whenever the house was open, tapes of Srila Prabhupada. So on one of those tapes, and I haven't been able to find it in the Vedabase since then, Prabhupada was talking about during the plague, in order to get rid of the source of the bacteria, which was the rats, the government offered 5 paisa for every dead rat that could be brought to the government a special office. So if you found a dead rat and turned it into the government, they would give you 5 paisa. So Prabhupada told the story at that time about a young boy, very poor, and he found a dead rat. So he brought that dead rat, and they gave him 5 paisa. Now, even in just a few years ago, we used to have half paisa coins, 1 paisa coins, 2 paisa coins, 5 paisa coins, 10 paisa coins, 25 paisa coins, and you could buy things with them. You could take a boat ride for 1 paisa in Navadvip. It was worth something, paisas. Now paisas don't exist anymore. So 5 paisas, you could buy something with that. So what the boy did was, because he had no other money, there were, at the pawn shops, the rejected pawn that had bad spots in it, he bought 5 paisa worth of this bad pawn. And he cut out all the bad parts, and he sold that pawn, and he made more money. And then he took that money and bought more of the bad pawn, and kept doing this until Prabhupada says that he actually became the biggest pawn seller in Calcutta. And Prabhupada uses that as an example because he says that there is such a thing as spiritual communism, and that's what we practice in our temples, because Krishna is the supreme and everyone is equal and will do any type of service to please Krishna. That's spiritual communism. But he says material communism, that will never work. And that's because, and he uses one expression, proprietorship turns sand into gold. So if one has even 5 paisa, if it's yours, and if you use it for advancement because you know that you're going to get some profit for it, then you'll work very hard. So even if you have some sand, that sand you can turn into gold if you know you're going to get some profit from the sand. So this is the example that Prabhupada gave that he saw that he experienced during the plague time. So now we'll continue. Prabhupada says, we were very happy. Not that because we did not purchase a motor car, we were unhappy. My father used to say, God has 10 hands. if he wants to take away from you with 2 hands, how much can you protest? And when he wants to give to you with 10 hands, then with your 2 hands, how much can you take? So, yes, there are examples when the Supreme Lord has 10 hands. He appears at different yagyas with 10 hands. And if he wants to give us something with his 10 hands, well, we only have 2 hands. How much can we accept? And when the Supreme Lord takes away everything with his 10 hands, how much can we try to keep? So Prabhupada also experienced that in his life. And he would often quote from the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 88 of the 10th canto, how when the Supreme Lord, when he sees that someone is sincerely trying to advance in devotional service, the Supreme Lord takes everything away from him, because in a poverty-stricken stage, his family doesn't want him, his friends reject him, nobody cares about him anymore. And in that condition, when he's completely dejected, then he turns to the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada did have that experience in his life, and we'll hear more about that later. My father would rise a little late, around 7 or 8. Now, Prabhupada, he said that he learned everything from his father. This late rising was because, we'll hear, then after taking bath, he would go purchasing. Prabhupada said that if anyone gave his father 50 rupees, when he went purchasing, he would spend the whole 50 rupees coming back with big quantities of things, because that was the way he purchased. Then from 10 o'clock to 1 in the afternoon, he was engaged in puja. Now both Srila Prabhupada's father's family and Srila Prabhupada's mother's family, they were all pure Gaudiya Vaishnavas. They never had meat, fish, eggs, coffee, tea, nothing in their whole life. And they all worshiped Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, both sides of the family. So Prabhupada said that although by some arrangement of the Supreme Lord he was born into a very aristocratic family, it was so that he could get this Vaishnav training from his childhood. And the puja was done to their family deity's name was Damodar. So his father would worship Damodar from 10 to 1. Then he would take his lunch and go to business. That was his cloth shop. And in the business shop, he would take a little rest for 1 hour. He would come home from business at 10 o'clock at night. So he would do his business mostly in the evening. And then again he would do puja. Actually, his real business was puja. For livelihood, he did some business, but puja was his main business. We would be sleeping, and Father would be doing arti. Now here it says ding, ding, ding. But when Prabhupada told this story, it was ding, 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 ding. This is what he would hear when he was sleeping as a child. We would hear the bell and wake up and see him bowing down before Krishna. Now, there are other details of his father that aren't mentioned here. For instance, when he would come home at night, he would have his main meal. He would have either puri or paratha or muri. And then Prabhupada says that as Prabhupada got older, he didn't eat the puri and the paratha or kachori, anything like that. He would just have hot milk and muri, puffed rice. So Prabhupada also, every night, we would bring Prabhupada his nighttime meal, 9 o'clock at night. He would take his nighttime meal after he gave a lecture here, wherever he was. It would be the same program. He would give a lecture at night. 9 o'clock at night, he would go to his room, and we would bring him hot milk and muri. Sometimes, when he requested, we would make paratha. Sometimes we would make kachori. We would always have sandesh. We would put sandesh in little tiffin for Prabhupada. Because Prabhupada, after he had this light meal at night, he would take about an hour and a half or 2 hours of rest. And then he would wake up, sit at his desk. We would put a mosquito net over his entire desk so that the mosquitoes wouldn't bother him. And he would do his translation work. So this routine of having hot milk and muri, Prabhupada learned from his father. Gaur Mohan wanted Vaishnav goals for his son. He wanted Abai to become a servant of Radharani, to become a preacher of the Bhagavatam, and to learn the devotional art of playing mridanga. So these were the 3 goals of his eldest son, Abai. Number 1, he wanted him to become a servant of Radharani. Number 2, he wanted him to become a preacher of the Bhagavatam. And number 3, he wanted Abai to learn the devotional art of playing mridanga. He regularly received sadhus in his home, and he would always ask them, "Please bless my son so that Srimati Radharani may be pleased with him and grant him her blessings." Now, perhaps we'll read on. There was a conflict between Prabhupada's father, Gaur Mohan Dey, and his mother, Rajani. Because Rajani wanted Prabhupada to get a very good education and become wealthy and become a British lawyer. We'll read about that. That means he'd have to go to London. And Gaur Mohan Dey, he would have nothing to do with it. He said, no, if he goes to London, he'll learn so many bad habits. So from an early age, he brought the mridanga teacher to teach Abai how to play mridanga. And he could hardly even reach the 2 ends when he started to learn. And Rajani would say, what is the use of this mridanga playing? But no, Gaur Mohan Dey said that he had to learn mridanga. And the tuition teacher, to learn his ABCs, would be sitting outside of the door waiting for the mridanga class to end. Now, there's another very interesting aspect that's not mentioned here. You see, when Prabhupada, we have our LKG, UKG, kindergarten for all the younger children. So Prabhupada explained that in that big house of Govinda Bhavan that was owned by the Maliks, there was one Marwari woman living there. She was very wealthy, from a very respectable family. She lived in another part of the building. And she had a stepson. Her husband had died. And the stepson was a drunkard. And without informing his stepmother, he sold the property of the stepmother for a very cheap price. It was the whole building he sold for 12,000 rupees, just so he could get a hold of the money. And then he brought the papers to the mother and told her she had to vacate. So she said, where will I go? How can you do this? It's not your property, it's my property. So she went to the high court, and the court said, this respectable woman, she should not be kicked out of her own house. So they made a rule that the stepson could get half of the house, and she could get the other half of the building. And she started a children's school there called Vishuddhananda Marwari Vidyalaya. And it was in the same building where Prabhupada's family lived, just on another floor. So Gaur Mohan Dey, when Prabhupada was of age to go to nursery and kindergarten, the younger ages, he decided, why should I send my son outside to an outside school? He'd have to walk and go somewhere else. We have a school right in our building. So this was how Prabhupada learned Hindi. And he learned Marwari culture because it was a Marwari school. So his first education was in this Marwari school. And later, we'll read about when he went to Motilal Seal School. Enjoying each other's company, father and son used to walk as far as 10 miles, saving the 5 paisa tram fare. So the tram had just been, Prabhupada, when he was little, he watched them put everyone knows what a tram is? It's a trolley. And there's an electric wire on top, and there's a rod, and from the electricity, the tram goes. Actually, before it used to be tram run by horses. So in Prabhupada's time, it was horse trams. And then they put down the rods, the railings, and they put the wires. And when Prabhupada first saw the wires up and he saw how it was able to move without any horses, he thought, oh, I'll just take a stick and I'll hold on to that and I'll go on to the railings and I'll also move. So, they had never seen anything like this, little children. I remember, because my father was the same age as Prabhupada. He lived in a village, and when he came and saw a trolley for the first time, because there were no cars, in a village there's no cars, so he looked at it and he thought it was another animal, because he had never seen anything move by itself. So he was looking, because he knew, as a little, like 3-year-old child, he knew that every animal passes stool from they have a tail. So he was looking in the trolley, where's its tail? So for young children, they couldn't understand how the tram was moving. And in order to take a tram ride, it cost 5 paisa. But his father, he would take Abai. They would walk 10 miles just to save that 5 paisa. And then Prabhupada said, and it was a very pleasant walk also. So he would take him to different temples where they would get prasadam. And the prasadam would cost 2 annas. 2 annas, that means half of 25 paisa, which is 12.5 paisa. And with 2 annas, they would get 2 big plates of prasadam. So he and his father had many adventures together, walking. On the beach, they used to see a yogi who for years had sat in one spot without moving. One day, the yogi's son was sitting there, and people had gathered around. The son was taking over his father's sitting place. Gaur Mahan gave the yogis a donation and asked their blessings for his son. Prabhupada often talks about the different yogis that he would see. When Abai's mother said she wanted him to become a British lawyer when he grew up, which meant he would have to go to London to study, one of the Mullock uncles thought it was a good idea. But Gaur Mahan would not hear of it. If Abai went to England, he would be influenced by European dress and manners. Gaur Mahan said, he will learn drinking and woman hunting. Gaur Mahan objected, I do not want his money. So Gaur Mahan was not interested in Abai becoming a moneyed man. He wanted him to learn mridanga, learn how to preach Srimad Bhagavatam, and become a servant of Radharani. From the beginning of Abai's life, there's another story about a yogi that Prabhupada tells. Maybe it'll come later, but since Prabhupada talks about yogis here, there was a yogi, and he had the special siddhi. He could take anything from anywhere. So he asked, what do you want? And the person said, he was thinking of something completely extraordinary. He said, I want pomegranate. So in those days, pomegranate you could only get in Afghanistan. So he said, go in the other room. The yogi told the man to go in the other room. And there in the other room, freshly broken off of the tree, was a branch with pomegranates on it. So Prabhupada did see that there were yogis, but they didn't impress Prabhupada, because Abai, he saw every day, Gaur Mahan Day used to feed at least 4 guests. And a lot of these guests were so-called sadhus. And so Prabhupada saw lots of sadhus, but he wasn't impressed by them at all, even though some of them did have mystic potencies. From the beginning of Abhai's life, Gaur Mahat had introduced his plan. He had hired a professional mridanga player to teach Abhai the standard rhythms for accompanying kirtan. Rajani had been skeptical. What is the purpose of teaching such a young child to play the mridanga? It is not important. But Gaur Mahan had his dream of a son who would grow up singing bhajans, playing mridanga, and speaking on Srimad Bhagavatam. When Abhai sat to play the mridanga, even with his left and right arms extended as far as he could, his small hands would barely reach the drum heads at the opposite ends of the drum. With his right wrist, he would flick his hand just as his teacher instructed, and his fingers would make a high-pitched sound, tini tini ta. Prabhupada would give, I don't know if any of you have heard it, but he gave the devotees mridanga lessons, tini tini ta. So we all learned those mridanga lessons. They were sent around on cassette tapes so we could all learn how to play mridanga. And then he would strike the left drum head with his open left hand, boom, boom. With practice and age, he was gradually learning the basic rhythms, and Gaur Mahan looked on with pleasure. Now, there are some things that Prabhupada describes about his mother. Okay. All right, it'll come later. I'll explain it then. Abhai was an acknowledged pet child of both his parents. In addition to his childhood names Moti, Nandulal, Nandu, and Kocha, his grandmother called him Kachori Mukhi because of his fondness for kachoris. In case we don't know, they're spicy vegetable stuffed fried pastries popular in Bengal. Both his grandmother and mother would give him kachoris, which he kept in the many pockets of his little vest. He liked to watch the vendors cooking on the busy roadside and accept kachoris from them and from the neighbors until all the inside and outside pockets of his vest were filled. Sometimes, when Abhai demanded that his mother make him kachoris, she would refuse. Prabhupada loved kachoris. You could make Prabhupada kachoris, he would eat all types of kachoris. So one time he was in Hawaii, and the devotees were there cooking for him, and they brought Prabhupada his prasadam, and he looked and he said, "No kachoris?" And the devotee said, "Well, Prabhupada, you didn't ask for them." And Prabhupada said, "I have to ask?" So he loved kachoris. Sometimes I would make him 5 kachoris at night, and the plate would come back empty. So, and then when our restaurant first opened, he was very careful to make sure that the cook was making the kachoris nicely. So one night they made the kachoris, they brought it for Prabhupada, and he wanted them saved for the next day to see if because if you make masala kachoris, they last for a long time. So he wanted those saved to make sure that the kachoris were nice. And then he also wanted us to make kachoris and samosas every night for their lordships here. And for the last offering, so that in the morning time, they could be saved at night, and in the morning time we could sell them for Mahaprasadam. But that never happened. The pujaris got to them first. But that was Prabhupada's plan. Okay. Sometimes when Abhai demanded that his mother make him kachoris, she would refuse. Once she even sent him to bed. When Gaur Mahan came home and asked, "Where's Abhai?" Rajani explained how he had been too demanding, and she had sent him to bed without kachoris. "No, we should make them for him," his father replied. And he woke Abai and personally cooked purris and kachoris for him. Gormahan was always lenient with Abai and careful to see that his son got whatever he wanted. When Gormahan returned home at night, it was his practice to take little puffed rice, and Abai would also sometimes sit with his father, eating puffed rice. Now, sometimes Gormahan would have to chastise his son. He never punished him, Prabhupada said. He never was punished by his father. But sometimes he would have to correct him. And he would say, don't mind, even Lord Chaitanya's father would sometimes correct him. So although he was the pet son, and Rajani was the disciplinary, Gormahan would also sometimes have to correct his son. Once at a cost of 6 rupees, Gormahan bought Abai a pair of shoes imported from England. Shrudakirti tells this story because this story was told by Prabhupada to him. And you know, little children, when they get nice shoes, we can all remember when we get our first pair of shoes. So when Prabhupada told Shrudakirti this story, Shrudakirti said, "Did you used to look down at your shoes?" And Prabhupada said, "Yes, I used to look at my shoes." I remember my first shoes. Does anyone else remember their first shoes? Yes. And each year, through a friend who traveled back and forth from Kashmir, Gormahan would present his son a Kashmir shawl with the fancy hand-sewn border. You can see even now, we have in Prabhupada's house, Prabhupada would wear these very thin border, hand-sewn, very special, pashmina, real pashmina, not the kind you get in the bazaar here. They would bring for Prabhupada. One day in the market, Abai saw a toy gun he wanted. Now when Prabhupada tells this story, he doesn't say gun, he says rifle. Abai saw a toy gun he wanted. His father said no, and Abai started to cry. All right, Gormahan said, and he bought the gun. Then Abai wanted another gun. You already have one, his father said. Why do you want another one? One for each hand, Abai cried. And he lay down in the street, kicking his feet. When Gormahan agreed to get the second gun, Abai was pacified. So this is how loving his father was to him. Abai's mother, Rajani, was 30 years old when he was born. Like her husband, she came from a long-established Gaudiya Vaishnava family. She was darker skinned than her husband, and whereas his disposition was cool, hers tended to be fiery. Abai saw his mother and father living together peacefully. No deep marital conflict or complicated dissatisfaction ever threatened home. Rajani was chaste and religious-minded, a model housewife in the traditional Vedic sense, dedicated to caring for her husband and children. So Prabhupada tells a few more things about his mother and also his grandmother, and his mother's grandmother as well. His mother, she was so chaste. There's one principle in the Vedas called Asurya Pasya. Asurya Pasya means that a woman would not even allow the sun to see her. And when she was invited anywhere, even if it was just next door to her house, she would either go in a carriage or in a palanquin carried by 4 men so that no one could see her. Of course, the palanquin would be all covered. Now here also, previously, we had rickshaws here. And the rickshaws had curtains. And for the ladies, we could pull down all the curtains so no one could see us. This was Asurya Pasya. It was part of the culture. But Prabhupada did not agree with the Parda system. He said that Parda was a Muslim practice because the men were so lusty that the women had to cover themselves completely. He said that, so he didn't recommend that the women, sometimes the girls try to imitate the Brijbasis and cover themselves up. Prabhupada said, no, that wasn't part of the system, that you wear parda. That was Muslim, not Hindu. But his mother was so chaste that she wouldn't go out anywhere so that the sun could see her. And then he tells a rather complicated story. If anyone is here from Calcutta, you would understand it a little better. He said that Rajani's grandmother, it was a very wealthy family, and they married their daughter to another rich family, a rich boy. But that family lost all their wealth. They became bankrupt. And the boy had nothing. He was poverty-stricken. So the grandmother, she said, he's a good boy. We married our daughter to him. So secretly, she gave him 500 rupees, which was worth 20 times more than that, 500 rupees. And she said, this is coming from the Supreme Lord. Without the grace of the Supreme Lord, you just put effort and see what you can do with this money. So there's a part of Calcutta called Kshetra. Have you heard of Kshetra? It's a big market area. It might have a different name now. So he was able to buy that entire market area. And on one side of the road, there was one road named after his family, Govinda Chandra Odi, and the other one was Rakal Chandra Odi. And he ended up becoming very, very wealthy just from that 500 rupees. And then Prabhupada explains, and this also we heard while listening to Prabhupada's tapes after he just left, because I haven't found these tapes it was just these particular tapes we would hear again and again. Prabhupada, he explained that so long as a woman is able, she should continue to have children. And she said that Rajani's mother, his grandmother, had, in the tape he said, when she was 55, she had her last child. That Prabhupada wasn't in favor of child planning or just having up to, so long as a woman was able, she should continue to have children. And then he explained that Rajani was the very last child of her mother. So when she was born, because she had had so many children before that, when she was born, the children of her brothers and sisters were older than she was, and they still called her auntie, Pishima or Mashima, Pishima, because they continued to have children so as long as they could. This was considered the woman's duty to continue having children. Abai observed his mother's simple and touching attempts to ensure by prayers, by vows, and even by rituals that he continued to live. Whenever he was to go out even to play, his mother, after dressing him, would put a drop of saliva on her finger and touch it to his forehead. Abai never knew the significance of this act, but because she was his mother, he stood submissively, like a dog with its master, while she did it. Like Gormahan, Rajani treated Abai as the pet child. But whereas her husband expressed his love through leniency and plans for his son's spiritual success, she expressed hers through attempts to safeguard Abai from all danger, disease, and death. She once offered blood from her breast to one of the demigods with the supplication that Abai be protected on all sides from danger. Now, this reminds me that at the same maybe it'll come later, but both Rajani and Abai at the same time, they got a disease called scurvy, where their legs weren't moving anymore. So his mother gave him everything possible so that he could improve. And then afterwards, she slowly improved. At Abai's birth, she had made a vow to eat with her left hand until the day her son would notice and ask her why she was eating with the wrong hand. One day, when little Abai actually asked, she immediately stopped. It had been just another prescription for his survival, for she thought that by the strength of her vow, he would continue to grow, at least until he asked her about the vow. Had he not asked, she would have never again have eaten with her right hand. And according to her superstition, he would have gone on living protected by her vow. For his protection, she also put an iron bangle around his leg. His playmates asked him what it was, and Abai self-consciously went to his mother and demanded, "Open this bangle." When she said, "I will do it later," he began to cry, "No, now," because they were making fun of him. So he made her take off the bangle. Once Abai swallowed a watermelon seed, and his friends told him it would grow in his stomach into a watermelon. He ran to his mother, who assured him he didn't have to worry. She would say a mantra to protect him. Srila Prabhupada. Mother Yasoda would chant mantras in the morning to protect Krishna from all dangers throughout the day. When Krishna killed some demon, she thought it was due to her chanting. My mother would do a similar thing for me. This is the love of a mother, especially for the pet son. His mother would often take him to the Ganges and personally bathe him. She also gave him a food supplement known as Horlicks. We all know about Horlicks, right? Also, when Prabhupada fell ill here in 1974, he wouldn't normally take Horlicks, but his sister was here then. And he and his sister, they had such a loving relationship. So his sister would feed him Horlicks when Prabhupada was sick. And that's how we found out about Horlicks. When he got dysentery, she cured it with hot puris and fried eggplant with salt. Though sometimes, when he was ill, Abai would show his obstinacy by refusing to take any medicine. But just as he was stubborn, his mother was determined, and she would forcibly administer medicine into his mouth, though sometimes it took 3 assistants to hold him down. So Prabhupada has his description of this. He said that he hated to take medicine, and he never liked to take medicine. Even when he was grown up, he wouldn't like to take medicine. So one time we were very worried about Prabhupada, because Prabhupada, he was borderline diabetic. And if he ate the wrong thing, his sugar would go up, and we'd have to restrict his diet. And Prabhupada didn't like that, because he liked rice, he liked potatoes, he loved sweets, but we wouldn't be allowed to feed that to him. The doctor wouldn't allow us to. So when he was training the devotees how to cook in the restaurant, he would taste what they were eating, and it would be very rich things. You know, in the restaurant, you have to cook very nice things. And they would bring him parathas in the morning, which Prabhupada never ate parathas in the morning, greasy parathas. And he was getting sick. When Prabhupada got sick, he had a special diet. He wouldn't eat his regular rice, dal, chapati, and sabji. He would only eat khichdi and curry and fried eggplant. That's when we knew when he was sick. He would tell us to cook that for him. So I was getting so worried. He was having the diabetes attack. We couldn't make any rice. We couldn't make any potatoes. He would ask us to make things, and I say, but Prabhupada, you can't eat potatoes. And he would look at me, and I said, I'll make it with cauliflower. Okay, make it, like that. So we were so worried. His servant at that time was Upendra. And we were told that, what should we do? Prabhupada was just getting sicker and sicker, eating all of this rich food. So finally Upendra said, I'll talk to Prabhupada. And this was, you never, tell your spiritual master what to do. But he was very humble. He went into Srila Prabhupada and he said, Prabhupada, we're so worried because you're getting sick now from eating all this rich food. We'll cook for you very simply. Please don't eat this rich food because now you can't eat normally. You can only eat khichdi and curry. So Prabhupada looked at him and he said, we are not Dr. Das. We are Krishna Das. And then Upendra ran into the kitchen and told me what Prabhupada said. We were helpless. We had to do what Prabhupada wanted because we were the servants. So, yes, Prabhupada would have his way. Like if there was any constipation, he would make nimbegan, all of the Bengali preparations. But he would not like to take medicines. So Prabhupada said that when his mother used to want to give him medicine, he said it took 4 men to hold him down. And then she would push the spoon into his mouth. And then Prabhupada went on to explain that when he was little, he used to pretend to be a doctor with his friends. Every kid plays doctor, right, with their friends. So his friends would come in, they would stand in front of him, and he would check their heart, check their pulse, and he would give them some medicine. I think it says later here, which was just dust, right? And then Hansaduta, who was listening to the story, he said, yes, Prabhupada, and you're still giving medicine, meaning medicine of Krishna consciousness. But Prabhupada took it another way. He said, yes, I know how to make all of the medicines. I would make my own medicines when I had my pharmacy. I know how to make allopathic medicines. I know how to make most of the Ayurvedic medicines. I follow the recipe that's in the books. And then Hansaduta said, no, you're giving us the Krishna medicine. And then Prabhupada, he went on to say that he was describing that, for instance, Nehru used to come to his pharmacy in Prayag, and he would never take Deshi medicine. He would only take allopathic medicine. And then also, he attributes Nehru. He said that Nehru was the one who established divorce law in India. Before Nehru, there was never divorce in India. He said he ruined the whole thing by making this divorce law because he said how peaceful his mother and father used to live together. So, Srila Prabhupada remembers, I was very naughty when I was a boy. I would break anything. When I was angry, I would break the glass hookah pipes which my father kept to offer to guests. Once my mother was trying to bathe me, and I refused and knocked my head on the ground, and blood came out. They came running and said, what are you doing? You shall kill the child. So both were very, Rajani wanted to give him a bath, Rajani wanted to give him medicine, and he was just as stubborn as she was. Now again about the doctor thing, an astrologer once told Prabhupada that in his previous life he had been a doctor, and he was sinless in that lifetime. But the astrologer said that maybe he had killed some snakes for some medical reasons. That was the only sin that Prabhupada had committed in his previous life. And Prabhupada confirmed it, that yes, I must have been a doctor, because from the time I was very young, I liked to pretend to be a doctor with my friends. Abai was present when his mother observed the ceremony of Sadahotra during the 7th and 9th months of her pregnancies. Freshly bathed, she would appear in new clothing along with her children and enjoy a feast of whatever food she desired, while her husband gave goods in charity to the local Brahmins, who chanted mantras for the purification of the mother and the coming child. So this is one of the sanskars that's observed by the higher classes during pregnancy. The mother is dressed nicely, bathed. In the beginning of the pregnancy, there's the parting of the hair by the husband. And there are different sanskars, about 3 different sanskars that are observed during pregnancy. So Abai remembers this sadahotra, this particular sanskar. When the mother, along with her other children, the mother she tells what she would like to eat, and everyone gives her what she wants to eat. Nowadays, they have what's called a shower. It's in the West, they have baby showers. So that comes from, it originates from this sanskar, when the mother gets what she wants. Abai was completely dependent on his mother. Sometimes she would put his shirt on backwards, and he would simply accept it without mentioning it. Although he was sometimes stubborn, he felt dependent on the guidance and reassurance of his mother. When he had to go to the privy, he would jump up and down beside her, holding her sari and saying, "Urine, mother, urine. Pesha, pesha." "Who's stopping you?" she would ask. "Yes, you can go." Only then, with her permission, would he go. Sometimes in the intimacy of dependence, his mother became his foil. When he lost a baby tooth, and on her advice placed it under a pillow that night, the tooth vanished and some money appeared. Did your parents do that with you? Put the tooth under the pillow, and in the morning there was money there? Abai gave the money to his mother for safekeeping. But later, when in their constant association she opposed him, he demanded, "I want my money back. I will go away from home. Now you give me my money back." When Rajani wanted her hair braided, she would regularly ask her daughters. But if Abai was present, he would insist on braiding it himself and would create such a disturbance that they would give in to him. Once he painted the bottoms of his feet red, imitating the custom of women who painted their feet on festive occasions. His mother tried to dissuade him, saying that it was not for children, but he insisted, "No, I must do it also," because all the other girls were doing it, and he wanted to do it too, what they were doing. Now, Prabhupada had a very sharp memory. Normally, little children can't remember their childhood, but Prabhupada has memories even from when he was 6 months old. He said he could remember lying on the lap of his older sister, and she was knitting. And he remembers very distinctly that she was knitting. And he has other memories, like the memory of the plague, when he was in the Sankirtan dancing, and he was only up to the knees of the children. So this is quite remarkable for a young child to remember so many things from his childhood. Abai was unwilling to go to school. "Why should I go?" Now this is when they took him out of the Marwari school, which is just in his building. Oh, I remembered another thing about the house. Prabhupada's grandmother lived with them. It must have been his dadima, or Thakurma. So they lived on the bottom floors. But Thakurma, on the roof, she had a garden. She had flowers and plants. She even had trees up there. And there were about 6 grandchildren. So she would get the grandchildren to take a jari, a sprinkling can, right? From the bottom, where the water was, go all the way upstairs to water her plants on the roof. And the 6 children, they would take it like a competition, running a nice exercise too, running up and down with the water to water all of Thakur Ma's plants. But when he was up there, he had he loved to sit under bushes. So when he was up there and the watering was done, he would find a nice bush and he would make a sitting place and sit under the bushes. So when Prabhupada went to, it was 1969, Prabhupada went to New Vrindavan. It was just getting developed then. And Prabhupada had a few disciples with him then. Bhagavan was there, Pradumna was there. A few disciples were sitting on the lawn with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada picked a tree to sit under. And he was telling about this, how he liked to sit under bushes when he was young. And how and Bhagavan said to him, yes, and look, you still like to do it, Prabhupada. So yes, I like this very much. That's why I just like to sit under the bushes like this. And Prabhupada, when in New Vrindavan, anyone has visited New Vrindavan? Yes. Very rolling hills and forests and beautiful trees. So Prabhupada liked that atmosphere very much. And he would give his lectures there while sitting under a tree instead of in the temple. Many times, also in the temple, but he liked to sit outside with his disciples then. So now, Prabhupada had grown up a little bit, Abai, and they wanted to send him to the primary school. This is the primary school. We had heard that in the Malak family there were 2 main branches, the Day family and the Sealed family. So this school was built by one of the Sealed family members. The name of the school was Motilal Seal School, primary school. And it was a short distance from their house. Can you see? Abai was unwilling to go to school. Why should I go, he thought. I will play all day. When his mother complained to Gaur Mohan, Abai, sure that his father would be affectionate, said, no, I shall go tomorrow. All right, he will go tomorrow, said Gaur Mohan. That's all right. But the next morning, Abai complained that he was sick, and his father indulged him. So Rajani became upset because the boy would not go to school, and she hired a man for 4 rupees to escort him there. The man, whose name was Damodar, would tie Abai about the waist with a rope, a customary treatment, take him to school, and present him before his teacher. When Abai would try to run away, Damodar would pick him up and carry him in his arms. After being taken a few times by force, Abai began to go on his own. Now, Prabhupada has a memory of some of his school poems that he used to learn and his studies in primary school. He remembers a poem about a little boy and a bird. And the little boy says to the bird, you come and live with me. I'll give you so many nice fruits. I'll put you in a golden cage. And the bird says, no, I just want to fly away. I don't want to live in any golden cage. I don't care about your fruits. So this poem, because Prabhupada tells that story later as an example of how we in the material world, we can't be happy here because we don't belong here. It's like being a bird in a cage. So from that poem, Prabhupada was later in his preaching able to apply it to Krishna consciousness. How we're just like the bird in the cage. And if you don't feed that bird, the bird will die. So nothing will satisfy a bird in a cage. It just wants its freedom. So this is how Prabhupada used to preach, remembering that poem that he had learned in school. So we'll stop now at 7 o'clock. And I hope you can all come next week and hear of Prabhupada's adventures as Abai. Hare Krishna. Jai. Any questions? Okay. Hare Krishna.